Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and Enfield Voices, and this is one of the many webinars we do where we interview a whole series of people who are making a difference in their community, whether it's local, national or global. And today we're looking at a local situation. We're going to talk to Cellina Daswell, and Cellina is a member of an organisation called REACT, which is in North London, in Edmonton. And Edmonton is one of the more deprived areas in London. And in her organisation was set up to work with her local community to help make a difference there, to make life better for people who live there. So I'm really pleased that you're here today, Cellina. And can we start, do you think, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in Edmonton?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to have a chat with you, Francis. I moved to Edmonton from Wood Green, and prior to then I lived in Highgate. And the reason why was because I was impressed by the community feel when I came to view the properties. And as at that time, it looked very much like a safe neighborhood. And I moved in 2003, end of 2003, and I've been living in my house since then.
Okay, and you have been involved, haven't you, now in REACT for some time, and that's a community organisation that was set up to work with the Edmonton community. How do you get involved in that? Tell us a bit about that.
REACT actually is a resident group set up by the chair, Grace Kamal, and she set it up as a neighbourhood watch. And it then morphed into the organisation that it is now, because it was more or less the only one that had a voice for the community and the residents at large. And it was also given the platform to discuss improvements and changes for the resident with the council. And I think the council felt impressed by the work that Grace had already initiated and asked if they could work with Grace and the group at large on the concept of the regeneration, which is called the Meridian Water. And with that, we then cobbled together a committee group. And I was invited by Grace to support her in the transition from a neighborhood watch to what we are now.
Oh, so it began really as a neighbourhood watch, and
Yes.
it's grown from there, which is amazing. It's based, isn't it, in the sort of Angel area of Edmonton, or is your membership wider than that?
The group consists of over 3,000 households, and it's from the border with Waltham Forest to the border with Haringey, beyond the hospital, North Mid Hospital. So we're border to border, and we are the only dissection that removes us from the larger part of Edmonton is the A406. So we're on the side that shares border with Tottenham. And that's where we only concentrate on. Bearing in mind, we're a very small group. We don't get any funding from the council. We're all volunteers. So we had to be conscious of what we could do within our resources and the time that we have to volunteer.
Well, I wouldn't say we're that small group, because you have about, I think, is it 3,000 members, which I think is quite amazing.
No, our catchment area covers over 3,000 households. We don't have 3,000 members, but our catchment area covers over 3,000 households.
Oh, so it's more than 3,000 members. It's 2 or 3 times that number, which is quite huge. I mentioned that it's one of the most deprived areas in North London. Would you agree with that? Is it an area where there is multiple deprivations?
Yes, I do. I think the significant part of our activity is focused on the deprivation level within the neighborhood, more so because even the council itself admits and recognizes the level of deprivation. The statistics and the data shows that on their website there is always a quotient of how much of the area has suffered from the kind of services that the affluent areas consider as de rigueur or more or less are provided without any question. And the saddest part of it, as we always bring to the council's attention, is that a 3-bed house in this part of the borough pays the same council taxes that a 3-bed house in the affluent part of the borough. But the difference is glaringly obvious, that we suffer in every aspect of what services that we are lacking, which is generously amplified in the richer part of the borough.
And I guess some of the conditions you face are child poverty, lower life expectancy, and more people out of work. And I guess that's even been made worse by the COVID crisis, hasn't it?
Yes, the area has always been the dumping ground. The easternmost part of the borough has always been the dumping ground for people who are looking for cheaper rent, people who are homeless. And the causative of that is that you are more or less putting same people together. There is no creativity in that kind of policy. There is no aspiration in that kind of policy. And the only time that we seem to feature in the national newspapers or the front pages of the news is when there is a stabbing, a murder, or something that doesn't really improve the image that we're trying to remove ourselves from. And that's one thing that we're trying to get away from, because according to the oldest residents in our neighborhood, this part of the borough was quite middle class, was well tended to, was a pride to those that chose to move in here. But that's not what we have now. Our high street is nothing to write home about. And the deprivation has grown in such a manner that people are feeling that they become really agitated by being prisoners in their homes, because the safety and the security is being compromised.
And you also, don't you, have a sort of large ethnic minority community there, particularly the BAME community, the black and ethnic minority community. So what's the mix like of communities in the area you live?
I always say that we're a mosaic community, as our treasurer usually says. We're a mosaic community. We have a large proportion of Turkish people. We have Somalians. We have Africans. We have a concentration of Eastern Europeans. We also have the white British people, who more or less are the ones that have lived here longest, but they have become a smaller proportion now, because they've moved out because of the standard and the way the place has gone downhill. So we have a concern as to how the area has become a cluster of groups of ethnic communities that are not really integrating. They're in their little hubs, and we need to change that. We want to change that, and we want to see that we're thinking alike and we're working together to save our community from being considered or stereotyped in a way where it doesn't do us any favor.
So does REACT involve all these communities? Is that one of your sort of jobs, you think, to bring these communities together and to create the dialogue that makes them feel a part of that community?
Uh, we are a group that does not have any racial or religious or how shall I say it, restrictions on those that are members of our group. The rationale behind being a member of REACT is if you live in the neighborhood. But we've also welcomed people outside of the border who seem to share the same kind of concerns that we have. However, the remit of REACT is to work for the residents, to serve the residents, irrespective of their ethnicity. So we've had a lot of engagement with the Muslim community. We've had a lot of engagement with the Kurdish community, the Christian Kurdish community. We've had the Christian Kurdish community. We had some kind of project with them to do a cleanup of our high street. And we believe that we all suffer the same issues. So there's no distinction between which group needs to be served any differently. I can proudly state that we had a social event for the first time in the neighborhood, I think three or 4 years ago, which was attended by everyone, and we made an effort to bring all ethnicities together, and we opened it to individual self-employed people to come and showcase their wares, and we did a lot of translation of what we were trying to engender in the community, which was well received. But that was a one-off because we couldn't repeat it without resources. But our sole aim is to work to bring the community together irrespective of their ethnicities.
And is a part of your aim as well to try and give your community a sense of pride of being there? Because you talked about how the area has gone down in the last couple of decades for no reason that's your fault, but because of economic conditions. So are you trying to get people to feel, Edmonton is a good place to be?
Yes, I've always believed that the only way to make an organization such as ours be taken seriously is to demonstrate it with facts. And my responsibility and my role within REACT is to engage with the council by bringing to them examples of well-run areas within the borough and also outside of the borough. And we've always believed that by being able to demonstrate that with facts and figures, they will not be able to tell us that we're only exaggerating or coming up with all this information out of the air. We have been able to collate statistics and involving the residents because the council was more or less at a loss by the numbers of complaints we were making. So we put together a 1-year consultation, interactive consultation mapping exercise where we were able to allow our residents to pinpoint using codes and indexes to pinpoint the areas of their concerns. And by the time we finished the exercise, it was quite kaleidoscope. There were lots of colors of areas in specific streets where there was a high incidence of drug dealing, prostitution, environmental problems relating to fly tipping and homelessness, and then other things like car dumping, and then some other nocturnal issues that created safety issues for the residents. And by the time we gave it, we took it with us to a meeting with Mr. Ochner, who was a cabinet member then. I think that was more or less the time that they realized that we were not the type that they could push over. And subsequent to that, we've used that at meetings with the leader of the council as well.
So how, I mean, what you said about mapping is really interesting because some people are trying to now look at how we can map the whole borough. And what you have done probably could be a really good model for that. How did you go about mapping? That's a huge job to do with 3,000 households. What was the process to get that together?
Okay, the template was quite difficult for us to put together, but I attended an event which gave me an idea that we could replicate something like that in our neighborhood, but we didn't have the tools. So we were able to ask an architectural firm if they could put together a street map of our catchment area on a board, and with that map we were able to create an index which had color-coded index with stickers, which we were able to ask our residents to identify the areas of their concern and place it on the specific street. And we did this at every meeting that we invited our residents to attend. Every REACT meeting, we had that board. When we had our first social events, which was attended by the residents 5 years ago, that was when we created this concept. And everyone that attended was able to pinpoint where the issues, their concerns were. And we continued that for a year-long exercise, which we then submitted at a meeting with Mr. Ahmed Oikner. And that same mapping exercise, we repeated it the following year, and we then submitted that at an event attended by the leader of the council, Nestle Paliscan, at a public event on Boundary Hall 2 years ago. This has helped us to demonstrate most of the issues that we have verbalized, but they have not taken seriously. And it has helped the council to also understand the backdrop of the issues that the residents are faced daily. But that hasn't really solved the problem, because much as we know that we have the ammunition to demonstrate what is the problem, we also need the resources on the ground to actively try and solve the problems. And that's where we have continued to push them to try and ameliorate the problems that we're facing and make our areas look like Bushel Park, make our areas look like Palmer's Green, make our areas look like Enfield Town or Enfield Chase, or beyond those areas that when we see it just on a bus ride, it looks like we're in La La Land, or we're in a land that is divorced from our backside, our area.
So having done that, which is, I think, amazing. What's your relationship with the council now? Have you got faith that they will do anything, or do you think you still have to keep the pressure up?
Well, we are an activist group, and we don't intend to shy away from making the council leaders and those that have the powers to be accountable for what they are in their position for. So despite and in spite of the efforts that we made so far, we are relentless in making sure that our area is improved to the extent where the notoriety for which is tagged with Upper Edmonton then becomes history. Our relationship with the council undoubtedly is very cordial and quite professional. And I think because we've been consistent and we're not financially dependent on them, we've been able to make a stand for the residents and for ourselves, because we happen to live here. We suffer the consequences of the effect of deprivation, and we're knowledgeable enough to know what is a better place, how a better place is run, how it looks. So, and we deserve to have that as well.
That's quite an interesting lesson, actually, to say that, you know, you are not dependent on the council, because I think the lesson there is you have more power, you have more influence if you're not dependent. If you're dependent, very often there's the begging bowl complex, but you seem to be doing a great job with the independence you have. But you have two problems on your doorstep, don't you? One is Meridian Water and the other is the incinerator. What's your view about Meridian Water? Do you welcome it? Do you think it will provide homes for your local people? Or do you have doubts about that?
I think there are lots of players already making their voices heard for the Meridian Water. We were one of the very first groups that the council invited to be consulted and to have a say in the Meridian Water. And from the time that the Meridian Water seed was planted, it has grown into something that doesn't mirror what it started off with. However, we know that we're a small organization fighting a big organization or a council like Enfield. So we don't have the powers to turn around anything that they're determined to do. But we do believe that we should be heard, our concerns should be heard, and it's best to work within the powers that we have than to work against it. We believe that the Meridian Water will be built, but we also are conscious of the fact that the council has a long waiting list and probably spending a lot of money on private rental, and it is a bad economic policy which needs to be addressed very quickly. And if the Meridian Water can and should address or remove the numbers on waiting lists, then we're in support of that. But I also know that there's a lot of voices about the possibility that the council is planning to build properties that are not 100% council owned or council tenants. That's a political issue that we are not going to want to be involved in. Your second issue about the incinerator,
yeah,
we've always raised the environmental impact of the issues that the residents have faced for more than a decade. I understand that when the FOCs was carved into the midst of this locality, that the residents complained, and there was some kind of compensation given to the residents then. Subsequent to that, we've been exposed to a high level of pollution. We've also been exposed to a higher incidental of industrial emission. And with the incinerator, we have suffered from the smells, and we were the ones that were so concerned. We raised that with the powers that be, and we even directly had meetings with the management, and we've been invited to some meetings with them, and we've raised the concerns from the residents to them. However, we are been led to believe that contrary to what they had planned, they have introduced something that we were not aware of, and we support the organizations that are now championing that area of concern, because climate change and the emission that we will suffer as a result of it is something that we don't want to ignore.
Is that, are you concerned then that the amount of emissions and carbon dioxide in the area is not only polluting, but it will add to the climate change problem? And is that one of the major worries that you have?
Yes, indeed. And we have since been contacted by the activist group on this carbon dioxide emission concern when that was raised, and we welcome the intervention. But we have to say that despite our effort to raise our concerns with the council was not cooperative or not that keen on it. And they've only taken an interest at this later stage when we saw an article written in the local independent or the local newspaper. And we wrote to those that, the authors of the article, saying that it's a bit late at this stage to have your concerns raised publicly and not inviting the opinions of REACT, who had more or less been canvassing for the council to intervene in it. What we still object to and we feel maligned by is that 7 local authorities will be bringing their waste to our doorstep, excuse me, and we're not getting anything for it. Even if they're saying that they're going to be putting some power or some kind of electricity into the Meridian, that doesn't bode well for the existing residents who are going to be exposed to the pollution elements, and they're not getting anything back from it. So we feel shortchanged by it, but we are watching the developments.
Well, I mean, you raised a lot of important points there, but are you saying that the council only talked to you after the incinerator had gone out to procurement? In other words, after the horse had bolted, that's when they talked to you?
I don't know when the incinerator went out to procurement. I do know that the first conversation we had with a cabinet member was when we saw the opposition by 2 Enfield Council councillors, I think. One was Pike and the other one was Yasmin Brett. And they were the author of a letter that was published in the local newspaper. And we wrote to them to raise our concerns about the way that they addressed the issue without even taking note of a local organization like ours, who are the nearest neighbors to the incinerator. And that led to a response from Pike to say that, yes, they understand that this is an issue which was brought to their attention, but it felt as though they had ignored it until it was so close to the time that it would be very difficult for them to make changes. And we also felt that despite our objection, we were too small to make a change that had already been rubber stamped by 2 local authorities. And we were more or less isolated in the fight. Although we made as much fuss as we could, the only engagement we had was with the management of the incinerator. We were invited to visit the place, which we did. We also invited them to come to our social event, which they did, and we also attended a consultation, which was attended by other stakeholders. And that was before the letter, the article in the newspaper. Excuse me. So it was something that we felt that the council could have taken seriously before now.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying, and I know that Vicky Pite and Yasmin Brett are 2 councillors who've had strong reservations about the incinerator. Have you talked to the ones who support the incinerator, who are on the leadership of the council, like Nestle Caliscan and Ian Barnes? Have you spoken to those 2 at all?
No, we haven't. We haven't been given the opportunity to have an audience with them. But I'll be very surprised if they do not know that we exist.
Okay.
And so by location, I should think that they should be making the effort to have a conversation with us. That there is a need for us to have an audience with them or to initiate an audience with us, because we are we are the nearest neighbor to the incinerator.
Well, I would keep pushing on that and try and get to talk to them, because that's really important. Does it make you angry, though, sometimes that it's the poorer communities in this country, and in fact in the world, that get the waste dumps, the incinerators, dumped on their doorstep? It's not in the leafy areas, it's in the poorer areas.
Yes, I've always questioned why the council feels that when they want to talk about the uh, rich areas, they use different terminologies. Green belt or some kind of definition is used to protect it. There's a level of protection for areas where the richer people live, and also because the richer people are more knowledgeable and they are probably more litigious in approach, so they wouldn't want to find themselves being challenged. And they also believe that while in the poorer area, they believe that most of the people that live there, they do not have the resources, the knowledge, and the impetus to challenge things that are obviously not right. And they give up quickly and easily. So they have the tools to wear down the people in the poorer area, which they wouldn't try in the richer area. And I always use that example when they say that they want to expand or build more. And I say, but there's vast acres of land in the richer part of the borough. Why wouldn't you try and build there? And then they come up with green belts, other belts, or other things that seems to work in their favor to dismiss the level of discrimination between the poorer and the richer. And that's why when we're talking about the incinerator, we felt that we were not getting the support from those that should be giving us the support. The councillors were equally quiet on this matter. And that's where we get the issue about the residents shouldn't be speaking on subjects that the councillors should be speaking for us, because the councillors are tasked with representing the masses on everything, not specific things. And the importance and the relevance of REACT is most because there is a vacuous need for the residents to be heard, and those that are tasked with it are seemingly not putting their efforts in it. If the demise of REACT will be because those that are supposed to be doing what they're supposed to be doing are doing it exceptionally well. But that's not the case at the moment.
Well, you say that people in the richer areas probably know more, but I can tell you there's not many more people than you who are knowledgeable. You clearly know a great deal about it, and your local group clearly is very, very determined to make their views known, and I think that's really, really important. So, I mean, given that, are you optimistic about the future in Edmonton? Are you optimistic you can make a difference and that you can bring people together and make people feel that they're, you know, proud of their area, and you can work with the council to make it a better area?
I am very positive about the successes or what we have achieved since REACT started. I think we've marginally done well if we have to compare where we started off. And I also think that if REACT had not continued their fight to improve this neighborhood, it will have gotten worse than this. I can imagine what we've had to deal with when we started, and how we were more or less dismissed as a non-entity or insignificant. But there has been changes and improvements, no matter how minuscule it is, that we are now the only or one of the few groups that can be contacted by developers, by consultants, by agencies that want to ask or be given information about our area. And I feel that that's an achievement on our part. And we don't see our efforts being diminished, because the good thing about it is that majority of the people that have the interest in the existence of REACT, they live here and they don't have any intention of moving away from here. And we owe those that are not able to speak for the vulnerable in the neighborhood and the disabled in the neighborhood and the ones that do not have English as their first language, but they feel that the area could improve. We owe it to them to improve the area to be proud of. I always say that a high street is the template that is used to determine a neighborhood, and our high street has not lived up to the expectation or can be compared to the high streets that we feel has been well run. And I always use several factors: beggars on the high street, drug dealers on the high street, fly tipping on the high street, chicken bones on the high street, on the pavements, and prostitutes on the high street, and still litter on the high street. All these things, I use them to challenge the council and say that until we see an improvement of the eradication of these problems, then you still got a long way to go. And we've been able to engage with teams within the council who are making efforts to improve on the areas that we've consulted them on. We've had meetings with the directors within the environmental waste department. We have had meetings with Enfield Society. I've had a walkabout with the leader of the council and Enfield Society representative. And we've had even been asked to speak to a radio host to raise the concerns that we have here. And we are also supportive of those that are living in developments where the leasehold scandal has affected them horrendously, and they're having to deal with issues that they had not prepared themselves for. So yes, we are hoping that things will improve, as we've had some improvement, and we know that we will continue to make the council and the leaders and those in power to be accountable for what they're responsible for.
Okay, well, you raised lots of points there, and we could go on for a long, long time, because there's so many points that we could take up there and find out a lot more about what's happening. But we sort of come to the end of the time now. But if anybody wanted to find out more about what you're doing, or if they wanted to get involved and support you, how would they do it? Where would they go to find out about you?
We have a website. It's called reactedmonton.org. And we also have a telephone number that you can contact us on. But our email is the best way to contact us. It's reactedmonton01@hotmail.com. reactedmonton01@hotmail.com. React Edmonton is lowercase, 01, and they're all one word at hotmail.com.
Okay, well, that's great. We'll make sure people know about that. And, you know, we've got you on several of our sites, including the Climate Forum one, which is great with your email. Anyhow, I mean, thank you for doing that, because you've told us an incredibly interesting story about your area, what you're doing. how you relate to the council, the problems that you have, where consultation has been good, where it's been bad, and how resilient and strong your organisation and your community is. And I think people will be really, really impressed with what you do, what you've been doing, and what you plan to do in the future. So thank you very much, Cellina, for doing this interview with me. And, you know, I hope we'll do some more like this.
One thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to say one thing. Yes, I do want to state that REACT believes that the Meridian Water development is a plus for the neighborhood. But we also believe that it should be developed to enable those that are currently on the waiting list to be able to move into the community and be part of the community. But we want the development to be a yardstick for the rest of the development that's going to be a 20-year development. However, we do not want the development to become a transient place for people to come and then move on. And we do not want the leasehold scandal to be an issue which we have in the existing neighborhood. We believe that the development should be a plus instead of a negative for the existing community, and we do not want to be the ugly sisters if it's going to be a Cinderella development.
Okay, well, I think that's an area you're going to have a big fight on, and I think you've got a lot of people who support you because they don't want Meridian Waters to develop and you to be left out because they bring other people in. You live there, you've lived there for a long time, it's your community. So, you know, keep fighting on that. That's really important. Anyhow, thank you, Cellina, again, for doing this. It's been really interesting. So we'll end this interview now.